YouTube, what the crap's going on? HeirofCarthage here, back with another Total War Rome 2 online battle. This time it's going to be myself representing Carthage against Syracuse, not to be confused with Athens, as I did so a couple of videos ago, and some of you are still like, Air, how come you won't even change the title? Look, Syracuse is basically Athens. There's very little difference between the two of them other than their mercenary selection. Which I guess does provide a few other options, but let's be honest, Syracuse and Athens are basically the same faction with different starting positions. So yeah, again, their mercenary selection is the only difference. Otherwise, they're mirror factions. So I brought a very weird army with Carthage here because I'm just very curious. And you probably saw my opponent's army on the intro screen as well. I got 4 Carthaginian Cav, 2 late Libyan hoplites, 1 on each flank. I've got 2 mercenary Iberian swordsmen with 3 chevrons, which gives them 41 attack, 65 defense. Very low morale and armor still. I've got 2 mercenary noble fighters, which are Carthage's strongest sword unit. I've got 4 mercenary Gallic warriors. A couple of them have a chevron. And then I have in the center a sacred band infantry, which many of you have asked me about and want to see more of. They are very much a better unit now. They are not the tankiest elite hoplite, but they're pretty darn good for the price when it comes to elite hoplites. And then that's it. Everything's mirrored on each flank here. And then I have 3 Balearic slingers and a general's bodyguard. So my opponent picked this hill, and he's like, yep, this hill's mine. Come get me, Patchy. So challenge accepted on behalf of Patchy. Some of you be like, this guy's just a hill camper. What a hill camper. What a jerk. He's playing the battle. Could someone really be a troll about camping? Sure, they can. But this guy wasn't. He's wanted to defend the hill here. There was no trash talking or whatever else. I think he was just playing the game in such a way that he thought he was going to win. And I actually thought, hey, this will be fun. I really like maps that have some terrain. There's a lot of terrain on this map. As you can see, there's kind of a large gorge down through here in between the 2 fighting areas. That kind of give the players something, and there's forest back here with another hill, wide open plains, little scrub in certain places. It's an interesting map. It's not symmetric, which is kind of interesting as well. And my opponent chose to capitalize on this. Now, do I have to attack him? No. I could sit here and wait for the timer to run out, but I don't see how that would do us any good. So it's like, hey, seize the moment, right? Let's go siege the hill. So my opponent's troops up front, he's got Thurios hoplites. I don't see these units used a whole lot, but he's going to do so. Their weapon damage is pretty poor. It's only 26 with 34 attack, whereas like this Thorax hoplite is better. Same melee attack, but much better damage, like 4 points better. Though the Thurios hoplites have a decent charge bonus for a hoplite. Their melee defense is pretty low, their armor is good, health and morale are pretty standard for the price. Obviously, you get a lot more bang for your buck out of Thorax hoplites, in my opinion, but these guys are cheaper. So a potentially useful unit still. He's backing them up with several skirmisher units. He's got 2 peltists mixed in with 3 units of archers, I believe. What's this archers? No, I think 3 peltists, actually. Yeah, 3 peltists mixed with 2 archers. And then he's got 2 mercenary Etruscan hoplites back here. It's a mercenary unit. Don't really get what's supposed to be so good about these guys. I'm not seeing it, other than pretty good. I guess they have pretty good health, base morale for a unit of that price. But then again, so do Thorax hoplites. So hard to say there. Mercenary Samnite warriors. These are very tanky sword units with 95 armor. That's actually a little bit more armor than a Praetorian guard. These guys have some seriously high armor. Their melee defense is not very high, but it's pretty darn high, once again, especially for the cost. Now, their downside is their attack. It's also not very high. So yeah, but they're pretty tanky in a sword fight. They can hang on for a long time because of those armor and decent defense stats. And they also have a pretty good charge bonus, rocking in at 25. So, and then over here my opponent has 4 Thurio spears, which this could actually be problematic. Some people are like, oh, well, they're easy to punch through with your infantry. Remember that I didn't bring particularly heavy infantry, and these guys can toss a lot of javelins. So, going to be concerning. So, anyway, I'm going to come around the flank of my opponent. You can see that he's wanting to defend this hill, but essentially what I'm going to do is just come over here, and that's going to force 1 of 2 things out of my opponent. One, it's going to make him reposition his troops to face me, which means that he'll have to face me on even ground right here and right here. or it means that I'm going to start having more troops than he is, and I'll start busting one flank, and then he's going to have to try and rush troops over to stop me, which is usually not a good thing. So in the meantime, I pull up my Balearic Slingers, and somebody's like, alright, sweet, Air's going to take out his archers. No, I'm going to completely ignore his archers. I'm not concerned about them. Could they damage me? Absolutely. Are his Peltas potentially threatening? Yes. What I want to do is weaken his infantry and give my infantry an even easier time outmaneuvering him. I think I have enough infantry to do a lot of maneuvering, and so my goal is going to be to pull down as many of his infantry units as I can. So like this Thurio Spear, I just killed 50 of them, and then took a couple of pot shots at his archers real quick before retreating in the face of his Peltas. This worries me a little. He does get a few throws against my Balearic Slingers, and I was like, you know, I can't just let his Peltas come up here and throw, and I'm not going to waste ammo on Peltas. These guys are not going to easily pay for themselves if I refuse to waste ammo on them. So if I waste ammo on them, it's actually helping the Peltas pay for themselves because they're heavily armored and well shielded. And if I start wasting ammo off of a Balearic Slinger on this unit, which would probably have a pretty hard time causing enough damage to pay for itself against these type of units that I brought, potentially if it threw at my Noble Fighters, but I mean if it starts throwing at my Gallic Warriors or something else, it won't be worth it. And then over here, I'm going to rush my cav in because my opponent has no cav of his own. This is a huge weakness. His all-infantry army gives him a better way to defend this hill, but it's also going to make him less mobile, and he left his guys on skirmish, which means they're not going to skirmish in the best fashion here. They're not running away in the right direction because of the way that my cav managed to get a hold of them. This Carthaginian cav's racking up a lot of kills. You can see here that the Peltas don't take as much damage to the Carthaginian cav, but the archers are very, very vulnerable. I had this other cav unit back here toying around with his men. Unfortunately, I got hit by a string of javelins there. But I'm going to go into diamond formation just to make my guys a little bit slipperier as far as their formation width, and I'm going to slip out of that situation. And here I managed to kill some more of his Peltas, but I got to get away because his Thurios hoplites are there. And again, I'm just going to keep harassing his skirmishers here. Going to charge into more of his Peltas, drive these guys back. He's going to spend some more ammo with these archers. Killing my Carthaginian cav isn't going to do him a whole ton of good here. It will do him good because it can keep my most maneuverable piece of the army away from him, but he's having to spend ammo to do this, which means that he's not going to have ammo for my Balearic Slingers, which means my Balearic Slingers are over here ruining his Thurio Spears. So this is a mistake by my opponent. He couldn't match my long range, and rather than come ahead and attack me, he's going to let my men have time to fire, and the last thing you want to do is give Balearic Slingers time to fire. These guys are deadly versus almost anything, especially when they have time to fire at you. Now, I finally decided to think about targeting one of his Peltas, and then I was like, nah, I'm still not going to do it. I'm just going to keep going after his Thurio Spears. So here comes an engagement. Let's just kind of see the different units that get stacked up against each other here. Mercenary Iberian Swordsman going into a Thurio Spears. This is, because of the 3 chevrons, roughly the same price range, not the exact same cost. My Iberian Swordsman should handily win this fight. His Thurio Spears didn't get a chance to throw javelins, but my guys didn't really throw any either. But I mean, this ought to be a fight that my Swordsman can win. Over here, his Thurio Spears charged my Swordsman because I was busy elsewhere. My Sacred Band charged his Thorax Hoplites in the center. It should be able to win that fight. And then he's got his Peltas trying to hold down my Mercenary Gallic Warriors. And anyway, again, so this is the danger. My opponent tried to defend this huge hill position, and now you can see that he's split into 2 groups. This was his left flank that's now engaged with my men, and you can see here his entire right flank, which is having to traverse the entire distance of this hill in order to try and come reinforce. In the meantime, his left flank is overpowered by my whole army. And then I've got these cav units here just running distraction, like so. He's got to actually pay attention. Now, another thing that you have to be aware of, and again, I'm not saying this to be mean to my opponent, I'm just trying to be straightforward here, because he was a nice guy. There's impassable terrain right here, meaning his troops can't walk there. So you can see that his guys had to come around it this way, and then some split this way. And you see how my cav had to just come around it there too. And again, this is just a delaying tactic, charging into his Thurios Hoplites. So again, I can delay his men even further. And this fight is just going to get wrapped up, and there's going to be very little he can do about it. My Sacred Band tanked out his Thorax Hoplites. Here comes a rear charge from some Gallic Warriors. This is not a unit you want to get rear charged by. They have a very competent charge and very sturdy weapon damage. And remember what we learned in the Total War Science thing that I made the other day is that units with high weapon damage, that weapon damage also gets boosted by the charge. And you can see here that my mercenary noble fighters are going to get a hold of these Etruscan hoplites and just start to wreck them. This is the last type of fight that the mercenary Etruscan hoplites want to be in. Yeah, so anyway, my units are breaking them over here, so those Thurio spears do end up getting beaten by these 2 units. And then I have some of those units pinned down here in the center still, some Thurio spears, and now I've intercepted his main reinforcing troops here that were blobbed up. So again, the terrain here forced him to come either all from this direction or to split again. He came all from this direction, and his men are now blobbed in this position. So I was able to intercept his whole group of reinforcements with a mercenary noble fighter. Now this is the kind of fight that my mercenary noble fighter dreams of at night, and that is a fight against spearmen from a superior terrain advantage in a big blob. That way the spearmen can't outflank the mercenary noble fighter. So again, this is just going to be a dream fight for my noble fighters. They're going to get a lot of kills. I go ahead and throw on Headhunt just to make that number of kills pop up even faster. You can see that these guys are already up to almost 150 kills with only 14 losses. So be careful about the types of engagements you take. So like when my opponent was approaching from over here, when he saw my mercenary noble fighters coming at him like this, he should have pulled back and taken up a more defensive position from here. Again, he had slingers behind him. There's only so much he can do, but at least not taking that fight where his whole stuff was blobbed would have been better. And some of you might be like, well, Air, you just outplayed this guy here. Yes, I did this time. I get myself outplayed a lot. You saw the last battle I put up, I lost. Again, it was fun getting to play against an opponent who doesn't bring like a cut and paste army. I actually enjoy this kind of thing. I didn't bring a cut and paste army for Carthage. So I like this type of fight, win or lose, because there's always stuff to be learned from it. Number one, it gives me a chance to see some of these units that I don't otherwise use much, like mercenary noble fighters. Look, my guys are exhausted now, by the way, so they're going to be less effective. So again, when should you use Headhunt? Probably not in the scenario that I did, where I knew I was going to have to stick around and fight a couple of hundred more men. But in this case, I have reinforcements coming. Here comes my Iberian swordsman. I'm just going to put them in front, help bolster my noble fighters. And these Iberian swordsmen are doing pretty well. My slingers are hitting him from behind with all kinds of slinger fire. This is, again, very bad for him. I got mercenary Italian swordsmen, or Iberian swordsmen on this side, and then mercenary Gallic warriors coming down from the top. More Libyan hoplites, and I'm going to come from the back with Carthaginian Cav. And I'm actually going to go ahead and just bring in all my Iberian slingers into a melee attack here in a moment, because I don't want to hit my own men with my own slinger fire. So my guys do come in for a melee attack at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and just let you watch the remaining Syracusan troops fight for their life, while surrounded by noble fighters, Carthaginian Cav, and at this point even murderous Balearic slingers coming in with their daggers. You'll see them coming from this angle here. There they come. Balearic slingers are not good in melee, but they're a lot better than they used to be in other patches. So, again, lessons learned here from my opponent. He tried to defend too big of an area, and it ended up allowing me to isolate and destroy one of your flanks. So if you're going to be defensive, you need to kind of consider the position that you're going to be defensive of, and understand how you're going to reposition based on different possible attack strategies that your opponent might use. So in this case, my attack strategy was to come at one flank, so he should have had a plan in place that when he sees me moving towards that flank, he should have immediately moved his whole army so that they could stay within support range of each other. When you think about our armies here, my opponent had a lot more infantry than me, and some of his infantry was quite good. Those Etruscan hoplites, for instance, they may not win a fight against my Gallic warriors, but I'll bet you they could in the right scenario. That would be a tough fight for my Gallic warriors. Those Samnite warriors, those guys would have been a very tough fight, especially think about if they had gotten onto the flank versus, say, my Iberian swordsmen or my late Libyan hoplites. Carthaginian Cav are great, but in a rear charge versus a heavy unit like a Samnite warrior, it's going to take a lot of rear charging to turn that around. Thurios hoplites, again, probably couldn't beat a mercenary noble fighter, but if he would have just gone straight into an infantry fight, like, so think about if his Thurios spears had been on both flanks, he engages my men frontally. Those Thurios spears could have tried to get around the flank. My Cav can't do anything about the Thurios spears. If all my infantry were engaged, which he had enough men to do, I think, to at least get a couple of the Thurios spears around my flanks, he could start throwing javelins, and that's pretty damaging. And some of my men are going to be pretty vulnerable to javelins, like these Gallic warriors and Iberian swordsmen. Even mercenary noble fighters, not a ton of... Well, actually, they have pretty decent armor, if I remember right, but... there's always things you can do. Hope you all enjoyed this one. I thought this was an interesting learning ground for me to kind of test out some of these units and just see how they fare. Obviously, some of these units are capable, even though they're cheap. I'm a big fan of the Mercenary Gallic Warriors right now. I think that they're quite good when used properly. And some of the other units that Carthage has available to them are much better than they used to be in previous patches. I think Carthage is a very versatile faction right now, especially if you know how to use them in different scenarios. So anyway, hope you all enjoyed it. HeirofCarthage signing off.